What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Kansas City Commercial Real Estate Market Pulse. I'm your host, Logan Freeman, and today's guest is Jenn Truman. She's the design principal at the Rocket Shop and a founder of CITYBUILDER, where she helps shape better neighborhoods through thoughtful design, housing advocacy, and smarter urban development, something very near and dear to my heart as well. We're going to give Jenn a full introduction here in just one moment, but we do host this podcast for one simple reason. It's that clarity beats noise. There's no shortage of headlines, opinions, and predictions about real estate. What's missing is grounded market specific insight from people actually doing the work, listing the properties, developing them, leasing them, underwriting, and closing deals across the United States and abroad. So this podcast exists to cut through the national narratives, explain what is actually happening on the ground, and help investors, owners, and operators make better decisions with real data and real context. We are live on LinkedIn, so appreciate everybody tuning in. Good friend David Hayburn, haven't talked to you in a while, man. Hope you're doing well. Says good stuff. Christo Rhino is also saying, yeah, tackling housing affordability in urban density requires a serious strategy. You bet. We're going to get into that today as well. Michael Meyer, strong cities are built when thoughtful planning, housing, mobility, and investment work together. If you have a question about anything that we're discussing, I'm not sure of any other live commercial real estate podcasts out there, drop them into the chat here on LinkedIn. We are monitoring that and here to answer your questions. So excited to dive in today. Here's our team, Midwest Commercial Real Estate Advisors. If you have any needs in regards to commercial real estate, Missouri, Kansas, we're very active in Iowa as well. We have projects in Wyoming. We have projects in Ohio. We have projects in Arkansas. But mostly in the Midwest. Reach out to our team. You've got them here. You can find us at www.mwcreadvisors.com. Jenn, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. So, Jenn, you're a design principal at the Rocket Shop, which is a local residential infill design firm focused on building place through community design. You've got experience in architecture and civil engineering. We were just talking about CAD files, and it sounded like your computer was really diving into some serious work and some modeling over there, and interior design. You've got a breadth and depth of knowledge to your work, both as a designer and a housing advocate. You're the founder of CITYBUILDER, which is the Triangle's pro-housing news and advocacy organization, and you serve on the boards of the Raleigh Transit Authority, the Fertile Ground Food Cooperative, and yes, in the Triangle. And I know that you have a big event coming up called YIMBY Town, which you're a co-host of 2026, which is a national pro-housing conference coming to Raleigh this November. So why don't you give the audience and the listeners just a quick background of how you got into this type of work and why you're so passionate about pro-housing and working on figuring out how to continue to bring great neighborhoods and affordable housing and just housing to the United States. I'd love to hear that.
For sure. I often get the question of how do all those things add up to something. So I'm used to answering.
Yeah.
The short answer is that like early in my career in design, I was working for small civil engineering firms and small architecture firms, small and scrappy, working for small businesses, trying to make people's dreams come true, whether it was their dream house and renovation, whether it was like the first coffee shop or the second ice cream shop. And I was just young enough and naive enough that when we ran into permitting rules and questions and things that made it hard to realize people's dreams that seemed fairly straightforward, I was like, why are the rules that way?
Yeah.
And I started asking questions, talking to my like local city councilors, showing up at city council meetings and saying, hey guys, did you know that these rules are pretty dumb? Like I said, just naive enough to think that it would change quickly.
Yeah.
But also, I think there's a lot of folks around the country in the YIMBY Yes in My Backyard movement who've had a lot of success over the past few years actually getting rules changed. And I made the pivot to work in housing about 3 years ago. So I did a lot of commercial work before that, and
Yep.
there's a lot of parallels between silly rules that get in the way of simple things, both on the commercial side and the residential side.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, let's talk about some of those rules and America's housing challenge. So, when you are working within that and you are working within that industry, trying to engage with, and I love that you mentioned city planning and zoning officials and working within codes and all the different requirements. What did you find? What was the challenge that you were coming up against on a regular basis that might have been a little out of touch or out of reach for the developers and the companies and the businesses that you were trying to make their dreams come true? I love that you mentioned that too.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who's tried to build something other than a single family home sometime in the last 30 years has probably run into these rules. The truth is that we spent the better half of the last century making a lot of the types of homes where people want to live totally illegal
Mm,
in cities across the country. And there's lots of great research and literature out there to back up how that happened and why that happened.
sure.
But what I try to focus on is like, what do we do now in
Yeah.
re-legalizing those homes? And so in Raleigh and in Durham in North Carolina, we are a growing place. We have people moving here every single day. Dozens and dozens of people moving here, being born here, wanting to come and grow in our place. And that's a thing that I think a lot of places share
Yeah.
across the country. And it's a good problem to have. But it means that we need more housing.
Yes.
And for a couple decades, um, folks in power, folks who were in leadership, they thought about bringing jobs, but they didn't think about bringing housing.
Mm.
And there's just a lot of rules in the way.
Yeah, yeah. We've definitely gone up against that challenge here in Kansas City and the broader MSA as well. Not just in regards to, zoning challenges, but even certain permitting requirements, whether it be adding specific eco-friendly things to homes that really not very many municipalities had. There has been some backtracking on that, and permits have gone back up, which is good. But if you had to change, maybe one policy tomorrow that you have to kind of butt your head up against on a regular basis that you believe might make the biggest impact on housing supply, what would it be? And maybe it can be more general, right? You don't have to get into necessarily one specific one unless you want to, but what do you think would really help the industry on the supply side?
Yeah, picking one would be like picking a favorite kid out of my four kids. There's a lot of rules in the way, but I think there's a couple that are like the low hanging fruit for folks to do first, that are really obvious. One is legalizing backyard cottages or accessory
Mm,
dwelling units. Is a really easy way to give people the flexibility in their own backyard to provide housing if they want to. So it
yes.
might be for a family member, or it might be to rent out, to a student or someone else who wants to live in the neighborhood, and you get to earn a little bit of income. It might be to let your grandmother move back in with you, or you get your college student just a little bit further away than their bedroom they grew up in. So ADUs, I think, are the most low hanging fruit for places, and they
Yeah.
definitely aren't legal everywhere. There's We've been able to re-legalize them here, but it actually took 7 years at city council to make them legal again. It wasn't an easy fight.
Yeah, and Jen, what was the pushback against, having an accessory dwelling unit at your home?
I think that density scares people.
Mm,
It seems like a boogeyman kind of word, to think that more houses could be in your neighborhood. Um, and at the end of the day, like the folks that didn't want them to happen were concerned about um, bad behavior, or were using that as a reason to say keep people out of the neighborhood that they didn't want to be there. They were pretty blatant when they spoke at city council meetings about who they wanted to live in their neighborhood or who they didn't, which I think fired up a lot of us young folks to really question that and ask, what do you mean? Who's supposed to be in your neighborhood? What exactly does that mean? What kind of language
yeah.
is that? This is the 2020s. What are we talking about?
Yeah, most definitely. I think when most people hear the word density, they immediately picture, high-rise apartment buildings or big apartment communities. There's so many different options now. You mentioned ADUs, but duplexes, townhomes. What is smart density? If you're looking and working on maybe a new development or how about this? Even better, right? Infill development
Mhm.
with existing properties. What does smart density actually look like in a neighborhood right now?
Yeah, I mean, I work primarily on accessory dwelling units and duplexes and quadplexes. In North
Okay.
Carolina, we can build up to 4 units under the residential code now. So we're having more and more folks be interested in building those old types of housing, returning to that old school kind of development. And it's a little bit more comfortable to folks than a big apartment building. I'm also a lover of apartment buildings, so don't get me wrong. I
Yeah.
think there are places in the city where missing middle density is appropriate, and there's places in the city where, tall buildings and tall apartment buildings are appropriate. And we need both in most of our mid-sized growing cities. But it does seem that it's easier for people to understand a duplex in their neighborhood. And at the same time, they fight that pretty hard.
Yeah. Well, a prime example is in a municipality that we've been working within. We wanted to bring a build to rent developer and do a project, and they're working on revamping their comprehensive planning and vision process, and we basically showed them that through the tax revenue that would be generated from that property. We gave them visuals of their other properties. Like, they do not look like, I mean, they look beautiful. I mean, you've
Mhm.
got houses, you've got duplexes, you got a pool, community area. I mean, it looks like a residential single family home neighborhood. And within that, we basically showed the fact that, hey, it's going to generate X amount of revenue, and 80% of all those dollars that come through are going directly to your schools. And you're saying in your comprehensive planning process that you're losing families to other municipalities, that missing middle. So, why don't you define missing middle for everybody here? And I'd love to hear your thoughts on build to rent communities and how that's being adopted in your location.
Yeah, for sure. Daniel Perelik came up with the missing middle housing terminology. He's the originator of it. But what happened was, 10, 15 years ago, folks were looking around their cities and seeing a lot of single family homes being developed and seeing a lot of 5/1, full city block or apartment buildings
Yes.
being developed. So they have like 200 to 400 units in them. Um, and the observation was, hey, why doesn't anyone build 2 to 100 unit buildings
Right.
anymore?
Yeah.
Those exist in great numbers in our older cities in New York, in Chicago, and Philadelphia. And people love living in them, right? They're expensive and sought after neighborhoods because of their location, but also because people like that kind of housing. And so the term missing middle housing is really about the building typology, the shape of the building, and how many units are in it. Um, but it gets a kind of double meaning in housing affordability
Mm.
circles, because in many markets, building a duplex in the same place that you would build a single family home, or building a quadplex in the same place that you would build a single family home, does make those units and dwelling units for folks more affordable.
Got it. Yeah, and in regards to just build to rent communities, have you seen an uptick of those being adopted in Raleigh and Durham and in your locations, or are those still being pushed back against?
I would say, well, here, if there's a type of housing project, we have it. So we certainly have build to rent communities that are being built. I think we're really lucky to have some of those look like traditional single family homes, tract subdivisions, like out on the edge of town. But several others are mixed in with townhomes, or they're mixed in with apartments and townhomes and single family. And so there's a mixture of ownership and rental options. So we have such a growth rate here. I think Raleigh and Austin fight for number one every single year.
Absolutely.
That there's if you can think of a housing product type, we have it. But we certainly have seen build to rent communities come in, particularly, as the interest rates have changed over the last 2 years. We've seen folks still be able to build housing because they know that they will be able to rent it.
Yeah, one of the challenges that we were going up against was, build to rent communities are labeled as multifamily.
Mhm.
And we really was asking, the Planning and Zoning Commission to rethink that and say, look, we're not building a 5/1, 200 to 400 unit apartment complex, right? It's a sprawling complex with buildings that are for rent, but the same zoning code that would allow for a build to rent is for multifamily. And that really boxes you out of where you can put these types of opportunities. And so we were trying to really progress the idea that you should adopt a specific zoning code and or process of evaluating these build to rent communities versus a high rise multifamily project. Those are two very different product types, or as you mentioned, typology of the buildings. And I think it landed okay, but that seemingly seemed like such a big daunting process that like P&Z was like, yeah, I get you, I hear you, but we're not going to do that.
Yeah, changing your zoning districts is not a small project for sure. Durham and Chapel Hill are both in the middle of doing rewrites of their ordinances, so I'm deep in conversations with advocates on those. What I would say is that sometimes the reason is not as direct or even making something special for a specific project type. One of the main reasons that build to rent communities get put into the multifamily category in the first place is that we have huge lot size requirements for single family homes.
Yes.
And most build to rent communities are trying to build on smaller lots.
Yeah.
And so because they can't make those lots, then all of a sudden all 50 homes are on one single lot. And now it's the same as an apartment building. And so there are actually things that cities can do, like reduce their minimum lot sizes. Durham did that, and they took their minimum lot size all the way down to 2,000 square feet. Austin and Houston have done this and seen a lot of housing production and in the affordable housing ranges because of just reducing the minimum lot size, because dirt costs money.
That's right.
But so I think that a special category is one solution, but I don't think it's the only one, because a lot size solution is agnostic to whether it's rented or owned.
Yeah.
Which means that it's much more flexible and allows people the flexibility over time to adjust how things are rented or owned, or for different developers and folks who want to entitle the horizontal components of that project to make different decisions over time.
Yeah, well said, Jen. Yeah, 100%. I'm going to take those notes back to Joe. Joe, if you're listening, we're going to be talking about that. Something that I think is really interesting is I believe Chris Porter, I had him on the show. He wrote a book. I don't remember what it was called, but he works with John Burns Consulting, and they introduced this idea of suburban, urban, and walkability being very, very important in that. So it's an area of town, and I would just like say, in Kansas City, it'd be around Lenexa's city center, and they have the opportunity to live, work, play all in one area. And they've built kind of what you're seeing here on the screen, which is this suburban, urban like type of ecosystem. And it has been extremely successful, right? And you've said that walkability isn't just a quality of life feature, it's an economic driver. So how does a walkable neighborhood actually translate into a more successful development where people want to live, stronger businesses, and a better long-term investment outlook?
Yeah, I think we often think of walkability in terms of quality of life. I'm in Raleigh, and we're the city of oaks, and so we think about parks and shade as purely a quality of life issue. But what we know is that the things that make a place really walkable also make the people that live there healthier. They also give them more choices and freedom of how to spend their money, because when you live in a walkable neighborhood, you may be able to reduce how often you use your car or how many cars your whole family has, which then gives you income that you can use on something else. And just the community aspect. Several folks recently have brought this up, including John the Happy Urbanist. But there's something Jane Jacobs talked about, which is just the casual acquaintance level of living in a neighborhood. So you might not know your neighbor or every single thing about their life, but you do sort of see each other when you take the garbage out or when you walk down to the coffee shop on Monday morning. And there's a trust in community that builds over time that is actually really valuable for the good of the community, but in the long run, also economically, like that makes you stay in a place. It makes you invest more in a place. It makes you support local businesses. And there's lots of research that spending your money locally magnifies the impact of that money. And so that's kind of how I lead into the mixed use conversation.
Yes.
Of being able to walk to the grocery store, being able to walk to the coffee shop, being able to walk to work. Those are real privileges that not every neighborhood can afford right now.
That's right.
And building more places where that's true, I think, is the project of the next 20 years of suburban revitalization.
Yeah, well, there's definitely cities and areas that have gotten this right, and I think
Mhm.
there's some common ingredients. And we're watching kind of a reformation of the Kansas City streetcar, and so transit being one of them. Obviously, mixed use development, like you just mentioned, great public spaces, right? Parks, a combination of all of those things is what really I think drives and designs places that people love. And so I want to shift kind of our focus a bit to your design sort of expertise, because you've worked across architecture and engineering and interior design. You know, I want to ask you, in your experience, what separates a place people, simply just use from a place that people genuinely love? Because we all know certain areas in Kansas City, it's Parkville, it's Brookside. There's specific areas that people love and they want to come back to. What's driving that? Like, what is that design? I mean, you're into this, and I'm very curious your thoughts on how people can develop these types of areas.
Yeah, I think some of it is those community aspects, but as a designer, I am very biased to think that beauty and quality have a lot to do with it.
Mm,
Um,
I agree.
People can tell when buildings and places have been cared for in the way that you craft them. My business partner and Lubeck and I, we talk about craft a lot.
Mm,
The craft of construction, the craft of putting a porch together, of designing. We design porches on all of our housing, and the porch is a friendly way to be part of the neighborhood because you can sit there and it's a room and you can enjoy your book and you can drink your coffee, but you can also wave to your neighbor or watch
that's
your
right.
kids play on the playground. Um, and I say a lot that the reason that we don't have them in most housing developments is actually a reason that people don't realize. It's not because people suddenly stopped liking porches. It's because engineers and architects don't always know how to talk to one another. And so the
Mm,
people that are involved in designing the horizontal entitlement levels of a project don't always talk to the people that are involved in the vertical elements of
yeah,
the project. A lot of times you have someone come out and lay out the lots for a housing subdivision. They sell it to someone else, and then those people lay out the buildings. And what's passed back and forth between the two is just a line, a box line on a drawing,
that's right.
which doesn't leave a lot of room for the nuance that a porch requires to get the stairs just right, to get the railing height just right. And so we talk a lot in our design practice about what are those porch moments, because I've yet to meet someone who doesn't like a porch. I'm sure
Yeah.
I'll get some in the comments today, but everyone loves them. And I think there's some things that we take to be true about all of the places that people love that you're asking about. There's a place to go to dinner and make memories with your family. There's a place to play. There's a place to listen to music. There's things that are in common about places that are
Yeah.
lovable. But a lot of them seem intangible until you realize that there's a structure, a building, a path that facilitates that occurring.
I love that. The porch moment. Man, I'm not gonna forget about that. We're gonna be looking for porch moments in our developments. That's so cool. And I just have to say, my wife is like, on our next house, we have to have a porch. I want to be able to sit out on the porch. So I can completely understand the porch idea. Maybe we have to start calling you the porch queen, Jen. You should adopt that. All right.
Sounds
Well,
good.
let's move on to building better cities together. So kind of looking into the future. When you look ahead, 5, 10 years, what does a successful city look like? What are you really pushing for? What decisions do we need to make to be making today, sorry, to get there? What do we need to be thinking about?
It's a really good question. I think the long lens is the right one. I think there's a real need, immediate and urgent need for housing in some places, including here. And we need to build quickly to serve that need. But at the same time, we need a long lens about how do we continue to support growth and housing production. And we need that because, frankly, we are starting from behind.
Mm,
I don't know what the numbers are in Kansas and Missouri, but in North Carolina, we're short 765,000 housing units over the
Wow.
next 3 years. And at our current pace, we can't build that many in 10.
Yeah.
And we're building more than anyone else in the country. And I think
Unbelievable.
that the lens that community leaders and, you know, builders and banks and policymakers, like everyone needs to make is what's getting in the way
Yeah.
of building the housing that we want, where we want it, right? Every city has a different answer for where the best place for the housing is. I think it's where neighborhoods are walkable. I think it's near the core. I think it's along transit corridors. But also, like, everyone should have a choice on where they live. Like, I'm from rural North Carolina. My parents are not moving to the big city.
Yep.
But they would like for lots of people to stay in the big city and not move into their neighborhood either. So we all have those family members, but I think that everyone should have those choices. And we need so much more housing and different housing types and missing middle housing types in order to make it happen.
Yeah. Wow. Well said. And I know that we're going to talk about some advocacy that you guys are putting on with the Yimby Town conference coming up here shortly. But before we do that, let's get into the quick takes, my favorite section of the podcast. So, you know, what is your favorite book that you love to refer out to people? Maybe you buy it for some folks and you always hand it out. What's that one book that you're handing out to people?
Yeah, the one that I most refer to people is actually Pocket Neighborhoods by Ross Chapin. And it's a lot of what we just talked about in terms of what are the little design details that make places lovable and make you want to live in your neighborhood.
That's awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely check that out for sure. That is a term that I have continued to hear, these pocket developments and pocket neighborhoods. So I'm going to check that book out. Thank you for that. What about one city that everyone should visit to experience great urban design?
That one's so tough. I'm going to say you should all come to Raleigh because I'm going to tell you all to come to Raleigh this fall. But I actually just was pleasantly surprised when I visited Bentonville and Fayetteville, Arkansas for the Congress of New Urbanists conference this fall. And I think there's, you know, they don't have everything right. They're a growing city and still figuring things out in many ways. But what they've done with their bike-oriented, greenway-oriented infrastructure that like people who live there use every day and also tourists use every day, I think is pretty special.
Yeah, it really is. I took my wife down there to Bentonville. We stayed downtown at the 21C Museum Hotel there, and Crystal Bridges, got on the track, and you know it was a lot of fun. And you know, one thing I did, maybe what you were kind of alluding to, was, you know, they don't really have any zoning there, it seemed like. So you could have a metal commercial building right next to a single family home right next to a McDonald's, and that just seemed a little bit wonky. But
yeah, I think that they have like tightened and loosened it a few times for that reason, but they definitely are experimenting in ways that I think are really good for people that live there.
Yeah, mentioning ADUs, I mean, every new building that I saw there had a really good size ADU. You know, it's like the front of the house, and then the elevation on the back they both had mailboxes. And my wife was like, "What is that?" I said, "That's an accessory dwelling unit. You know, it's an ADU." I thought that was really interesting. One of the challenges I think they're coming up against right now is pricing. I mean, they're so one of those new buildings was $1.5 million to live in, you know, and that prices out a lot of people. So obviously they're still battling the supply side of things as well, trying to get more and more housing there because, wow, I mean, that just was, I was like, well, I know it's expensive to buy a new home, but man, that seemed really expensive in Arkansas, you know, so I did mention that too. Sure. Okay, outside of porches, what's one neighborhood trend that you're most excited to see over the next decade?
I can't say porches. That's tough. I have 4 kiddos, so I'm actually going to say the neighborhood-oriented playgrounds. In a lot of the pocket neighborhoods we're finding little places to put a swing set, or to put, you know, a slide and some climbing stuff. We have a gorgeous destination park in Raleigh and one in Cary right now, and what we found is that watching kiddos play or playing with them has become a real community feature.
Yes.
And I think, you know, cities can invest in those things, but also like a little pocket neighborhood of 6 houses can invest in like play infrastructure that will last through multiple kids and multiple lifetimes.
Love that. Yep. We've got one in our neighborhood we walk to on a regular basis, and we get to meet the families and the kids and people drive there to go to it. It's got a beautiful lake that people can fish in, and it's a great asset, right? And I couldn't agree more. Well, I know
And I
you
think,
got, yeah, go ahead.
oh, I'll just add, I got to go back to, I grew up in the military. We moved around a bit, and I got to go back to one of the towns that I remembered a playground from when I was 5 or 6. And I went, and it was still there, which was a miracle in and of itself.
Yeah.
But I was, even though I like talk about playgrounds all the time, it was so special to like see a playground that you remembered playing on and come back to it. And I think that those little bits of memory and playfulness are really important to how we build community in neighborhoods.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Jen, thank you so much. Point people in the right direction. So well, tell them a little bit about Yimby Town 2026. I'm going to get the website up, yimby.town here, so everybody can see it. But tell us about the conference. What's going on there?
Yeah, Yimby Town is a national gathering. This is the 10th anniversary of Yimby Town. In the last 10 years, it's grown from 200 people to over 1,000.
Wow.
Yimbys across the country, yes, in my backyard, advocates, policymakers, elected officials, designers like me. We come together once a year to swap stories, vent a little bit about how city council meetings are going, encourage each other, and really think about what's next in the movement. So if there's anyone that you follow on LinkedIn or Blue Sky or Twitter, even still, that you have in the YIMBY movement, they'll be there. We are lining up keynotes and speakers now, but early bird pricing ends on August 15th. The conference is November 17th through 19th in downtown Raleigh. And we'll be doing tours of housing all over the city and all over the Triangle. Like I said, if there's a type of housing that you would like to see, we are probably building it here. And that's our goal, is to kind of give people an experience of housing, how it's getting built, where the policy pinch points still are, even in a place that has made some reforms happen, and hear about some of the wins. We recently got rid of parking mandates statewide. And other folks in the movement are coming to share about their progress on parking reform in transit districts, and legalizing everything from ADUs to large scale apartment buildings in California and New York. So it's where we really come together.
Amazing. Well, we've got it up on the screen, yimby.town. Check out the conference. Go meet Jen. She's going to be there putting it on, co-hosting this conference. I've got to acknowledge you for your advocacy, for your work, for your thoughtful work in this industry, and for the fact that you're willing to, put it out there and have the hard discussions and discuss all of these different components. It's needed, and it's welcomed in the commercial real estate development and real estate development worlds. We need more folks like you speaking out about this, bringing the opportunities and the perspectives that people need to hear. So check it out, yimby.town. Jen, thank you so much for joining us today here. I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And if you guys want to check out our team and you have any needs in regards to commercial real estate in Missouri, Kansas, or the Midwest, you can find us at www.mwcreadvisors.com. Been another wonderful episode with Jenn Truman here. Yimby Town. I love it. No more NIMBYs, all about the YIMBYs. You can check it out. We're here every single week. I appreciate you guys showing up. Next time I see you all lurking in there watching, ask some questions. Get some questions in here. We want to engage with you guys. So don't just show up on your lunch hour and just watch. We're here. We're live. Ask the questions. That's why we have this type of interactive show. So thanks for showing up. Thanks for being here. Jen, thanks again for your time.